Hey everybody, Ryan here at Etrailer. Today on our 2021 Subaru Ascent, we're going to be showing you how to install the Etrailer.com Class 3 trailer hitch receiver. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this is something that's going to work for you. Probably my favorite thing about this hitch is the fact that it can be completely hidden whenever you're not using it. So for example, whenever you have a bike rack or a cargo carrier in here, you plan on pulling a trailer, this is how it'll look. Really easily accessible. But when you're done doing those type of things, you can take the removable panel. This will just pop into place and cover things up. And then that's going to give you a complete factory appearance. People use these Subarus to do pretty much a little bit of everything. Pulling a trailer, using accessories, and just about everything in between. And so we really do get a lot of questions in regards to that type of thing. And I want to address the fact that this will be a great all-around hitch for pretty much anything that you're going to do. One of the reasons is the fact that it gives us really good clearance. You know, not only ground clearance, since it sits way up here, we're not going to have to worry about bottoming out or anything, and that'll be particularly useful if you use a cargo carrier. You know, it'll sit up nice and high off the ground. And on the same note, it's going to give us really good bumper clearance. So what I mean by that, the end of the receiver tube opening here, it's going to be pretty much flush with our back bumper. And what that's going to allow you to do is use those folding type accessories. You know, you're going to be able to put them in that upright position and not really have to worry at all about them contacting the back of your Ascent. With this being a Class 3 hitch, it is going to give us that 2" by 2" receiver tube opening. Extremely common size, and a ton of different accessories will work out with it. At the end there's going to be a reinforced collar for a little bit of extra strength, and it is going to use the standard 5/8 pin and clip. Now, keep in mind, a pin and clip does not come included, but if you need one, you can grab it here at Etrailer. The safety chain openings are going to be a little bit different. They're going to be plate style, and they're going to sit on top of the receiver tube, and they don't give us a ton of space, but enough to use pretty much any size hook. This one, for example, you can get in there with relative ease, but to me it seems a little inconvenient. If it were me, I'd probably choose to use a hook more like this, and that'll just make things a little bit easier. The hitch is going to give us some really good weight capacities. As far as the maximum gross tongue weight rating goes, that's going to be 750 pounds. That's going to be the amount of weight that's pushing down on the hitch. So really high number, and you should be able to use pretty much any size bike rack or cargo carrier that you'd want to, for example. As far as the maximum gross trailer weight rating goes, that's going to be 5,000 pounds, and that's going to be the amount of weight that is pulling on the hitch. So that is the weight of your trailer plus anything that you might have on it. This hitch can be used with the weight distribution system, which is a separate component. And when you use that, what it's going to do is help keep your trailer and your Subaru nice and level whenever you're pulling the trailer down the road. With that said though, even if you do use that weight distribution system, the weight ratings are going to remain the same. Do always like to suggest though, never a bad idea just to grab your owner's manual. That way you can make sure your Subaru can pull that much weight safely. And with all that said, you know, if you're pulling a trailer, you're going to want the lights to work. That way people know what you're doing, and you'll be safe and legal. And to accomplish that, you can always check out some trailer wiring to get that job done. Now let's go ahead and just grab a couple of measurements. That way we can try to figure out which hitch mounted accessories are going to work best. If we go from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube opening, that's going to be right at about 24 inches. So if you plan on towing a trailer, chances are pretty good you can get a ball mount that has a drop in the shank. If you go from the center of the hitch pin hole to the edge of the rear bumper, that's going to be right at about 2 inches. And we kind of talked about this earlier, but you can use that measurement to figure out exactly if any of those folding accessories you do have can be stored in that upright position without hitting the back of your Subaru. So when it comes down to it, you know, what more could you really ask from a trailer hitch? Not only is it going to look awesome whenever you're not using it, since it's completely hidden, but it's going to get the job done. You know, it's going to allow us to pull our trailer or use our accessories, whether it be for work or play. So with that said, for 1 second, if I was to choose a hitch for my Ascent, I would not hesitate putting this one on the back of my own Subaru. With that said, as far as the installation goes, really not too bad. It may seem a little intimidating right off the bat because you do have to remove the fascia, but believe it or not, Subaru has made it very easy. You don't need, you know, a bunch of crazy tools or anything like that. All the fasteners are really easy to get to, and you'll be surprised how quickly everything comes apart. I know I was. But speaking of the installation, why don't we go ahead and put the hitch on together now. Before we get started working on our car, just gonna do a quick rundown on some of the tools that you're gonna need, and pretty basic stuff here actually. You're gonna need a 17mm socket, a 10mm socket, a couple of various different size extensions, and a way to turn the socket, of course, whether it be a hand wrench or a power tool. Then you're also gonna need a flathead screwdriver. To make things a little bit easier, removing some of the fasteners, you can also use a trim panel tool like this one here. And then you're gonna need a way to tighten down the bolts that actually hold the hitch on. So a torque wrench is something else that you're gonna need, whether you already have one, borrow one, or even rent one from the store. And I also suggest having some painter's tape. That way we can kind of mask off some of the areas when we take our fascia off, and we don't have to worry about scratching it up. And you're also going to need a way to bend some small metal tabs, and so a small hammer like this will get the trick done. But with that said, enough with the tools. Let's go ahead and hammer out this project. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our Subaru, and along this bottom edge here, we're going to have a total of 6 push-pin type fasteners. So 3 on each side. These 2 here in the center, we don't need to worry about removing these just yet. But with that said, from this point on, anything we do to one side of the vehicle, we're also going to repeat on the other side because it'll be set up the same way. And the way to get these fasteners out, you can take a trim tool or a flathead screwdriver, just pry down on the head of the fastener, and that'll allow us to remove the fastener in its entirety. Now if we move to our wheel well, at the edge here, there's going to be one plastic fastener. We need to pull that out. And with these, you can take a flathead screwdriver and you're going to push down on the center of it. And you'll feel it kind of pop down. And then what you're able to do is take that screwdriver and just pry underneath of it to get it removed. Now if you open up your hatch, and look right here next to your taillight, we're going to have this plastic panel. We need to remove this to get to a fastener underneath it. And these just more or less just kind of pop off and just start at the top and work it off, set it to the side. And then down here, we're going to have a 10mm head bolt. So we'll go ahead, grab our socket and pull that out. Now with an extra set of hands, we can remove our fascia. What I've done is put some painter's tape along the seam here. That way we don't scratch up our paint on accident. What you're gonna do is start at the edge and kind of just start to pull out on it. That's gonna release these tabs. Then once we get closer to the center here, you may have to kind of maneuver this around and start to pull out. That will release everything, and we may have some wiring that we need to disconnect. In this case, over here on the driver's side, we're going to have that plug there. We're going to push down on the center of it and separate it. And with that done, we can set our fascia off to the side somewhere safe. We are going to have some wiring that's connected to our bumper beam, and we need to separate that. Over here, we're just going to take a trim tool, pry that up, and we kind of just tuck that off to the side for now. Let it hang there. And essentially the same deal over here on the driver's side. This connector, we'll get our tool under, pop it out, and push it off to the side. At this point, we can remove our bumper beam. So this is going to be held in place by 4 fasteners. We're going to have a 17mm nut and then 3 17mm head bolts. So I'll grab our socket and get those removed. And I already have the other side removed, so what you're going to do is just kind of lift up and pull the bumper beam off the vehicle. We're going to set this to the side as we won't be reinstalling it. If we look right here, you'll see this tab that kind of comes up. We need to flatten that out, that way it doesn't interfere with the hitch. It's pretty easy. You can just take a hammer and tap it in, about like that. And while we're right here, let's go ahead and go over our attachment points. So the hitch is going to sit in this original spot here where the bumper beam was. For the stud, you're going to reuse that factory nut. And then for these 3 holes, you're going to use a bolt and a conical tooth washer. Make sure that the teeth on the washer are going to face towards the hitch. And it's not a bad idea either to take a brush and just kind of work it through the 3 weld nuts there. That way if there's any rust or debris in there, we'll clean it out. And the way it's going to work, when the hitch is up there, you're going to take these bolts and simply just thread them right into place. Now we can grab our hitch and put it into position. What I like to do is take the nut and get that started hand tight on each side. That way the hitch will support itself while we work on the rest of the bolts. With all these, I like to get them all started hand tight. That way we can make sure the hitch is centered and where we want it to be before we tighten them all down. So we're just going to make sure we have the hitch centered so you can push it all the way over to each side. What I like to do is just split the difference and then just kind of eyeball, make sure that our receiver tube, is lining up with this latch up here. So looks pretty good. And with that said, we're going to take a 17mm socket and tighten down all of our hardware. When I do these, I like to do kind of an X pattern to help draw everything nice and flat. Now we need to make sure and come back with the torque wrench and tighten down all of the hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can pick one up here at Etrailer, or a lot of times you can go to your local auto parts stores and they'll have one available to rent. Now we can go ahead and get our electrical sensor and connectors resecured. So there's actually some holes in the hitch, and you can push that back into place. And then for good measure, what you can do is take one of the included zip ties, just kind of wrap it around and snug it down. Now we can grab our fascia and reinstall it the opposite way that we removed it. Don't forget to plug in any electrical that you may have disconnected. And pretty straightforward, we'll just kind of carefully get everything lined back up. Just start to kind of work our way back around, pushing everything in place. Once you have your fascia secured, you're all good to go. Now, if you're ready to use the hitch right away, you can pull this center panel down, and it's super easy. Just have a push pin fastener on each side of it. And with these, what I found is you can actually get your finger in there on the back side of the fastener and just push it down. That way you don't need a tool. Whenever you try to pull the whole thing out, it may be kind of tight. So the first couple times you might need your trim tool or something to pry it out. But over time, you do this a couple times, they'll start to loosen up a little bit, and you can probably just remove this whole panel using just your hand. So if those popped out, grab this, pull it out. That'll expose your hitch, and you'll be ready to use your accessory or hook up to your trailer. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Etrailer.com Class 3 trailer hitch receiver on our 2021 Subaru Ascent.